Fab. Okay, so I think we're all in. So we're going to get cracking, and we have Lexie Smith, who is joining us today. Very, very experienced project manager, and she's working currently in business change, but she's done a wide variety of work in the project management field. And I believe APM was your qualification, Lexie. So we haven't heard anyone from having done that qualification yet. So this is a great opportunity to listen in. I'll hand over to Lexie, and she'll just talk a little bit about her experiences and so on. We'll go straight to questions, any particular questions that you have, and then I'll stay on the line for anybody who wants to talk about specifically making the transition as an event manager into project management. So if you haven't heard me talk on that before, I can do that at the end, and we can talk a bit about that. But before we start, we have to ensure that Lexie is human. So we have a few quick fire questions for you, Lexie. It's just the first thing that comes to your mind, and it's just a way to just prove that you're human. So if you're up for it,
go for it.
Tell us, what was your favourite age?
28, which is where I am now.
Nice. A few people saying that actually the age they are in now, they're loving. That's
yes,
good.
It's a good age.
Okay, what's on your nightstand?
Items that I don't really want to share. And lots of coffee cups.
Love it. Describe a snapshot of an everyday small joy.
Definitely my Costa in the morning, straight out of the Tassimo machine.
Oh, nice. Like it. Yeah, definitely human and my kind of gal. So yeah. I'll hand over to you, Lexie, just to share a bit about you and your experience.
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently, as Jay sort of mentioned, a project manager in business change. I've been a fully qualified APMP certified PM for 5 years now, working in a multiple, kind of variety of project backgrounds. Really, I've done contract roles, permanent employment roles in insurance, IT organisations, manufacturing and engineering. Most recently, my current position is in non-for-profit organisation. So if I just give you a bit of a background as to my career journey, when I was 20 years old, I managed to land a role as a project administrator. So that was sort of 2012, supporting project managers and program managers in a big manufacturing and engineering company that was that had a massive global presence. And then 2013, I was enrolled on a 2-year apprenticeship for project management, which was APMP accredited through that employer. And then 2015, I became qualified. They slotted me into a junior PM role, but I kind of wanted a bit more than that. So I flew the nest from that organisation. And then from 2015 up until now, getting an array of experience, exposure to all sorts of projects, which has kind of enabled me to build the life that I really wanted. So that's a little bit of a background about me. So I guess really this is a sort of session for you guys to kind of ask me questions. Anything you want to know about being a project manager. Qualifications, training, just fire away. I'm happy to try and help.
Thanks so much, Lexie. Just while they're having a think about their questions, I've got a question for you. What would you say kind of the key differences for you have been in being contract versus being permanent?
So my experience of the two has been very different. As a contractor, there's a significant amount of pressure for you to enter an organisation and make an impact straight away. So, my experience has been you need to sort of walk in the door, find out very quickly what's going on, and make an impact and start, getting things delivered. You tend not to get involved in the office politics, which is really actually very nice. So you can kind of take a step away from that, because you're not a full-term fixed-term feature, and you tend not to get too involved in the culture of the organisation. So the really nice things about it is, training. You don't need to go on training. If you're not into doing personal development planning, going to one-to-ones and all of that kind of stuff, you don't have to do it, because you're not going to be there for a longer period of time. Obviously, the flip side, if you're going into an organisation permanent, is you do have to fully immerse yourself into that company, the company's culture, their policies, their procedures, the people that you're working with, because even though a role is never permanent, there's something about the word permanent that just makes you sort of, you kind of have to integrate yourself into it. So
that makes sense. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I've got a question for you, Lexie. So you mentioned that you kind of worked across multiple sectors. How much does sector knowledge impact your day-to-day work?
So to be honest with you, it doesn't. The reason that I chose to bounce around was to enable myself to grow as a project manager. I'm a very strong believer, and some people would disagree with me, but I'm a strong believer that as a PM, you can be a PM in anywhere. It's taking a process, a set of transferable skills, and moving them across industries. A lot of the projects that I've dealt with, I've obviously learned and absorbed information as I've gone along, and that does serve a purpose. So if I transfer into a new role and I might get a project that's IT related, I can draw on some past experience where perhaps I've dealt with IT and systems before. It does help, but it's more about, have you got the right skills as a PM? Can you take a process from one company to another company, embed it and make it work?
Sure.
So hopefully that's answers your question.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hey Lexie, hi.
Hello.
I was going to say, do you come up against much resistance, or kind of people, oh, we've never done it that way before, so, what's so special about your way, especially if you're kind of coming into the business and not necessarily knowing kind of, what they do at the core?
Yeah, sure. So in projects, there's always resistance. People don't tend to like change, and as PMs, we're enablers of change, so we need to bring people on that journey. What I will say is, when you go into an organisation, they tend to have a governance structure in place for how they like to manage projects. It could be that they've taken the Prince 2 methodology and they've kind of made it their own. And you kind of just fit in with that. But in terms of my application with project management, there are things that there's things that you get to do with your communication styles that you might bring in that are different. So it's follow a methodology that the organisation tends to have in place. Don't try and rock too many boats, because it does upset people. But if you've got the opportunity, which I always have had the opportunity, is to just be myself, communicate with teams in a way that I might like. That might be virtual beers, all sorts of stuff. But you tend to find that they've got a governance procedure in place that they do like to follow. So yeah, that's my experience of that. Hopefully that's how
You tread carefully and be
question.
respectful as well. Yeah. I think it's yeah, I can
Absolutely.
imagine. Yeah, cool, thank you.
Lexie, can you explain governance structure? I'm just saying that because as an event manager going to project manager, I didn't initially understand that concept.
Sure. So when it comes to projects, and sometimes I'm not very good at explaining things, so but when it comes to projects, they can fall into like a life cycle. So you'll have concept, definition, development, realization, and handover into business as usual. With a governance structure, it's really what it's trying to do is just make sure that project managers are are being kept honest. They're doing the documentation that they need to be doing. They're signing off at each stage. So they're saying, right, I'm in the concept phase of my project, and that might be about what's the idea that we've got on the table, you know, what do we want to achieve, and highlighting all of the goals. At the end of the concept phase, you might need to go to a stage gate review with, you know, various stakeholders and senior management team, just to explain, I've done what I needed to do in that phase. Are you happy for me to proceed to the next phase? And that's kind of how a project should work. It should just be constantly, you know, like every phase, plan, do, check, review, you know, and that's what the governance structure is there for. It's basically to keep us honest.
Mm. And so it's essentially a hierarchy for each, like you would get in an organizational structure. For each project, you would have the same thing for each project, because each project would have a different governance structure. So a different hierarchy of people that you are, what's the word, that you are kind of reporting to,
Yes.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And it might be that, you know, as a PM, you might have 2 or 3 projects at once. I've certainly had that situation before, 9 at one time, once before. And the governance structures don't always fit the scale of the project that you've got. You might have a quite a small 50k systems update project, and it's quite clear at that value, you don't need to take it through every stage of the governance process. So you might agree with the governance or PMO, program management office team, whoever's in charge of it, that, you know what, it's not worth bringing that in at every point. We trust what you're doing. You're a safe pair of hands. Check in at the start, check in the middle, check in at the end, and that's it.
Great.
So I see we've had a question from Nadine. Do you have to be office-based contractor, or can you work remotely? It really depends on what the organisation wants you to do. So I've been very lucky in pretty much all of my roles. As a PM, it's nice to have the flexibility. So I have spent a lot of time working at home, more so recently. But, you know, in the past, it's typically been a nice blend of the two, you know, 2 days in the office, 3 days at home, 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. And just managing, you've got to show that you can manage your time. So, you know, if the senior team, you know, see that you're not in the office when you need to be, or you've perhaps got important meetings or workshops and you're not there, you probably need to evaluate what you're kind of doing. But it's always just about being sensible. If you've got a workshop for half a day, it's probably best to go in the office if you can. Hopefully that answered your question, Nadine.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Hello, Tim here. Sorry, no video because, as I said, it's very hot. So I've got 2 questions. Thanks for the overview. First one is, as I sit on my bum here, I'm looking for new work. So where would you look for that work? And the second one is, and this is something that I've experienced before as a contractor coming into a project management role. How do you make sure that you get the buy-in of your teams and influence them? Thanks.
No worries. So in terms of looking for new work, where to look? I can't give you sort of like a go-to place. It's all those places you're probably already looking. Indeed, LinkedIn. What I will say is, if you haven't already had a look, have a look at the APMP website. They tend to advertise quite a few project management roles or project support roles, coordinate roles, program managers, that you might not necessarily see on your typical Indeed, Read websites. So definitely take a look at that, and, you know, reach out to recruiters. You know, I started, when I was looking more recently, I started going into the search bar in LinkedIn and just typing the words recruiter, project management, and seeing who came up. And then whoever came up, I just sort of connect with them, pop them a message and say, hi, I'm looking for a job. You might not have anything, but here's my number. Let's have a chat. And that approach seemed to work. I'm not sure if many people are aware you can do that, but that's certainly a top tip from me if you haven't already been doing it. And then secondly, what was the second question? How do you make sure you motivate and influence your teams?
Yeah, so if you go in and you've got you were talking before about governance structures, but if there's a structure there that is particularly tricky, or you've got to influence a group of people, as a contractor, how do you go in and influence, especially if you've got change? Because quite often, if you're going in as a contractor, you're the kind of crack team coming in to get stuff done. And getting the buy-in and influencing those people, even if they're senior, can be quite tricky. So yeah, what tips do you have?
So whenever I've kind of gone in, regardless of being a contractor or not, I always like to go in and just have a chat with people, find out who they are, and what makes them tick. And this is all the stuff that you'd probably be doing anyway. Cake, chocolate, that always works to get people bought in. And generally, I've always found that integrating with teams, if you actively listen to what they're saying, you find out a lot of information. You'll typically find in organisations where they might have a lot of change going on, teams are going through a lot of change fatigue. They've had enough of it, and another project manager coming in, they're just sitting there going, oh, here we go again, here's another one. And bringing them back on board can be difficult, but I've always found that if you just sit down with them, have a chat, they'll probably tell you that they've had it up to here with projects, they've had it up to here with change, because they've got a day job to do. And I always find that it's your job to just sort of take that all on board, be their emotional punch bag. They might want to have a moan and a gripe because their manager's not listening to them. Be that person to listen, and then you've won half the battle in that sense. And then it's just about recognition. If they're doing something, make sure you recognise what they're doing. Keep them informed of what's going on. Nobody wants to be the last person to find something out. And you'll typically find in a lot of organisations, communications, one of the biggest problems that they have. Teams not talking to each other. So try and be the glue that kind of puts people back together again. Hopefully that helps, Tim, a little bit.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Oh, Nadine, why did you choose APM over Prince 2, or have you done both? No, I haven't done both. I've just done APM. If I'm honest, I didn't choose APM. My organisation that I was with at the time decided they were going to put me on APM because all of the project and the programme managers in our department were APM. Looking back in hindsight, I still would select to do APM. The reason for that is, from my own personal view, I see APM as a commitment to the project management profession. There's, you can get member status, so you can start off as a student, you then grow into associate, you then grow into member, you can get your chartership, which is basically when you're at the stage of saying, give me any project, I'm a safe pair of hands. And then you can go on eventually to get your fellow membership status. So there's a nice clear progression path with APM. It isn't just you've done a foundation or you've done a practitioner and that's kind of the end of your development. So I would still always advocate for the APM. I hope that answers your question. Jay, you're on mute.
Unmute me. Okay, thank you. I've got a question around how you found this project management in itself as a career, in terms of its flexibility, in terms of things like COVID happening, and obviously the events industry is almost shut down completely. And I know when my organization went through a huge amount of change, everything was uncertain, really rocky. That's why I went into project management, to provide that level of kind of flexibility. How have you found it as a secure or safe kind of career path?
I haven't really had a bad run. So projects, I've been made redundant once. But what you will always find with projects is, in organisations, when times get tough, projects are the first to be cut. It's because, you know, they want to focus on BAU. So when we just look at what's happened with COVID, you know, I could see across the board projects and programs were being slashed in all sorts of different organisations because they just want to focus their time on, business as usual. You know, just to keep the lights on, the money coming in, you know, they don't want to invest in change. So things go on the back burner. But in terms of a steady career, I have had a steady career. I think that's probably because of the fact that I've moved around so much. So when I've noticed that a role might be coming to an end because projects aren't coming in the door, I've made that move at that time. So I would say it is a steady career, but you've got to keep your eyes and your ears to the ground at any time, because even though, yes, it can be secure at an organisation, you tend to find that you have to get in at a really big organisation that's going to have a real steady influx. You know, they've got a good pipeline, the projects just keep coming. You know, so you can absolutely stay in an organisation for a very, very, very long time. And I know several PMs that have done exactly that. But typically PMs tend to sort of bounce around, and that's why a lot of us go into contracting.
Did you say you're working for a not-for-profit now as well?
Yes, I am. I just started 3 weeks ago.
Oh wow, during this time, blimey. So what is your role there? What projects are you managing?
So I'm under business change. So I'm basically dealing with integration of two companies into one. So they've merged with another company, and we've now got to take two of everything, turn it into one of everything. So the projects that I could be dealing with could cover absolutely anything. It could be customer service, contact centres. It could cover IT, systems, HR, you know, restructures. It could be anything. And that's one of the reasons why I was excited to join, because it is just, you could be doing anything.
Yeah, I think that is one of the biggest benefits for me, in terms of the variety that project management and change management for me as well kind of provides. It could be anything. It could be project management in events, running, you know, community events and doing things like that. But you could also be working in a company and doing a restructure, a startup hub, you know, whatever that is. I was in one company and doing all of those things, you know, a project in all of those things. So I think that is a big benefit.
Definitely. And you know, if you want to talk real talk about project management, it's not all glory, and you know, it's really not. It's definitely one of the hardest things that I've ever really done, and it's just because it's so challenging every day, because project management is predominantly based on relationships with people, communicating with people, and pulling things together. So you could be sideswiped at any moment in your day. If you're the kind of person that enjoys adaptability, constantly feeling on your toes, and you know, changing and getting involved in anything, you know, a typical day for me would look like back-to-back meetings on an array of subjects. So I could be sitting 9 o'clock till 10 o'clock talking about contracts and negotiation with, you know, the legal teams. Then, you know, 10 till 11 I could be talking about problems with, you know, HR systems. And then, you know, the rest of the day it could be anything. So you've got to be really sort of nimble, and able to pick up a lot of topics, and fluently talk about them as if you know what you're talking about as well.
Yeah. And I think with that, you make a good point. Sorry if my internet's a bit crappy. But it is the majority of the case that I won't necessarily know the legal side of things, but I just learn it. You know, Google is your friend.
Yeah, get resourceful. That's one of the biggest tips. You know, I could be sat there on a number of occasions in the day. I don't know what something means. Google is my new best friend. It's the first go-to place when somebody says something that I don't understand. And then all of a sudden you sound like you know what you're talking about, which is essentially what, you know, what project management can be about, really. You're kind of sometimes a jack of all trades and a master of none, which I'm kind of okay with. You know, a lot of people will say you need to specialize and you need to niche in something, but I'm kind of okay with not, because what I niche in is being a project manager, and I'm quite happy with that.
Just a quick one. Sorry, I seem to be asking a lot of questions. Do you have a preference for any particular tools or systems that you use? That's one question. And then also, obviously, how do you then adapt if you're kind of moving around to different businesses? Obviously, you know, they already have systems and CRM systems or whatever in place, and you're then having to kind of come in, and do you adopt those, or do you then try and implement something new?
So I don't tend to, it depends, to answer your second question, it depends on whether the organisation seem receptive to adapting what they're doing. In some places you can go in and sort of see an opportunity for change, you know, and you sort of go, oh, you're using that. Like, I've been in some places before where I've walked in and gone, oh my God, they're still using Microsoft Excel to do scheduling. You know, and it was a real opportunity to go, you know, have you tried MSP Online? Let's have a look and have a go at that. But in terms of my favourite sort of tools, techniques and stuff, for planning, it tends to be Microsoft Project. The downside of Microsoft Project is the PM typically is the only person that understands how to read the Gantt chart. So you could spend hours, and I mean hours, I've spent before making a project plan that was thousands of lines long, and I'm really proud of it at the end of it, but then you go to demonstrate it to somebody else and they haven't got a clue what that means. So you then find that you need to take it back, and you know, you might end up going back to basics with Microsoft Excel, sadly. So it just really depends on what your audience wants to see as well. If you've got a team of IT people, perhaps they don't like using MSP or Excel, perhaps they might like it in a PowerPoint or Visio. So I tend to find that even though my preference might be to use X, I always have to adapt it to what somebody else wants to see. And that plays in its favour in the respect that you gain new skills. You know, a few years back, I didn't even know how to use Visio at all, but now I'm like, fine, give it here, you know, and I'll use it. So it does play in your favour.
Hey Lexie, I've got one which is more of an observation. I'd like to just see if you agree with this or not. But what I've found with project management roles is that your point of being a jack of all trades and a master of none is really interesting, because sometimes the organisation will pull you into areas that you're not necessarily an expert of or should be. So for example, I've worked on loads of projects where you suggest something, it involves some form of marketing or something that is connected to sales or comms. And then they'll say, right, can you plan out what that marketing is going to be? Or could you write a sales strategy? Have you found that before? And kind of what's the thin line that you've got to tread?
So yes, I have found that before. And it tends to be that PMs will absorb a lot of work. And what I tend to do is I just simply say, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, and just get that out there. The quicker you say it, the better, because it can also allow for the opportunity to realign expectations. So I've had scenarios before, much like what you've just said, Tim, where you've been led down a path and you've started to think, oh God, I'm not an expert, I don't know what I'm doing there. The quicker you do say, I don't know what I'm doing, or, you know, do you want me to do that? It quicker that gives the person the opportunity to say, I didn't want you to do it, I wanted you to facilitate it. Because a lot of the time that's what they're asking PMs to do, is to get the task, facilitate the right people to, you know, to make sure that it gets done. So it might be that you're not writing the strategy, you're just getting the right people in the room to to write the strategy. Equally though, I have had situations where I have had to roll my sleeves up and do tasks like that when I'm not an expert, and I will go back to what I said before, get resourceful, you know, get on that Google, you know, talk to your network as well. If you've got people that you know in marketing or anything else, say, hey, I've been tasked with this, how would you approach it? And there's a lot of information you can get from other people. Pull that together, take it back to whoever you need to and say, this is what I've done, am I going on the right lines? Literally, I swear 90% of the time you're onto a winner because you're already giving them more than what they probably thought you were going to. So that would be my sort of, you know, yes, I've got the same observations as you, Tim, to answer your question, but that would be my approach with those typical situations.
Fab, thanks a lot.
No worries.
Any other questions there? Everyone happy? Final chart. Awesome, brilliant. Wow. Thank you so much, Lexie, for that. Really, really insightful, and we got some amazing questions there. So thank you for your time.